Hello everyone, and welcome to Friday Forum Live. We are live today from Point Blank Music School in East London. Point Blank is an international school offering a wide range of higher education programs and professional courses in music production, DJ, music business, singing and radio. We are joined live today by Dan D'Ascenso for a mastering session with iZotope Ozone 9. Dan is the Regional Account Manager for iZotope Europe and the owner of Left Right Audio Studios in Belgium. It's a real pleasure to have you, Dan, today to discuss your mastering philosophy and in particular your approach to dynamics and loudness in the streaming world. We're doubly excited as today is the release of the first single from our upcoming compilation album on Point Blank Recordings, featuring all our students' work. The track today is Cloud9 Yeah by the artist LXDEE, and maybe they're online. I think they're online joining us today, so nice to see you guys. So if you want to hear some of the work from our students and our releases, you can head over to pointblankrecordings.com and to check all our latest releases. So without further ado, Dan, over to you.
Hello everyone, hello JC, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to show you how I master and my approach of mastering in general. I will start actually, if you can write in the chat, what is mastering for you? I don't know your level right now, if you are bedroom producers or more advanced producers, in general, it doesn't matter. How do you see mastering in general? I will check the chat as well. And but meanwhile, I will just play the track which I received from you guys. And I mastered it a few days ago. A really lovely track, very fresh and summery.
Cheers, we love it too.
Yeah, it's really nice. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, let's switch over to my DAW. I'm using Reaper, and it doesn't matter actually. Everything that I will show here, you can do it actually in every DAW, so it doesn't really matter. I'm using 100% iZotope Ozone products here, and just quickly show you my my chain. I use first here this Ozone 9 instance. I will talk about the details more later. Why I'm using these modules and how. Then I have just a quick meter. This one is disabled, and then I have two maximizer to push the level to a certain level. Okay, so let's play it right now.
It's captivating, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah. How am I ever gonna lie to you? Never cheat, only have for you. Didn't even have to give you clues. Honey's so good in this game of two. Oh wow, what the hell? You just took me somewhere else. Works my body well. Got me so hooked, got me so compelled. Oh my god. It's captivating. Pressed his chest against my back. Feeling trust uncomplicated. And I'm like, yeah. No second guessing. Wrapped his taste around my heart. Never loved nobody like this. And I'm like, yeah. How am I ever gonna lie to you? Never cheat, only have for you. Didn't even have to give you clues. Honey's so good in this game of two. Oh wow, what the hell? You just took me somewhere else. Works my body well. Got me so hooked, got me so compelled. Body well. Oh wow, captivating, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah. I've lost my patience, wrapped his breath around my neck. No one else is worth the waiting, and I'm like, yeah.
There we go. That was already the unmastered version, so really the mix that I received to master, ready to master. I will just switch it here so we can move forward. And yeah, I read in the chat that the final polish over finished track is mastering, in my opinion. I also read that mastering is making it ready for club and radio, or for tape and vinyl and such. This is totally right. I see it actually in two steps. We have the technical side and more the creative side. For me, mastering is, I take it as a creative step in the music productions. Of course, there is the technical side of thing, because music needs to fit on all platforms and systems, and we will talk about the different platforms that I mostly cover in my mastering job. But there is also systems, which means from laptops, speakers, because I'm pretty sure that lots of people are listening to music and consuming music over laptop speakers, or even smartphone speakers, to cars, to high-end I would say audiophile systems, and of course club music. So this is a little bit of challenge to listen to the track and to say, okay, what creative decision I will take to achieve this certain level or this certain quality of master. And few years ago, I heard a quote from a mastering engineer from Sterling Sounds, Craig Calby, who said actually that mastering has a lot to do with how we hear and how do we explain what we hear. And it changed literally my vision of mastering, because I see now, since many years now, I'm doing mastering for more than 16 years, 17 years now this year. And that communication with my clients is probably one of the most important steps. And I'm talking with that I will not approach the mastering on the same time, on the same level, I would say, when I'm mastering a track, indie rock track, for instance, who is supposed to be normally only played on streaming services, or sometimes CD or vinyl, compared to a dance music or electronic music style like this one, who will be played on streaming services, but also by DJs in clubs. And there is a kind of differences, or I think better to say, a way to approach the mastering, or at least to think about it. At the end, you are the final decider, and there is no really rules. I would say it's more guidelines, and mostly in music productions there are some rules, of course, but I always found that there are more guidelines to help you to take your own decisions. And this is actually what I wanted to show you today, which means that I master it, like you can see here, the blue one is a mastering more, I would say, optimized for streaming services. And the green one just below is more kind of a louder master dedicated for download stores. And the yellow one is what we are, I would say 85% of the time, listening everywhere, which is very loud. And I will just play here. And tell me as well in the chat, which one do you prefer between the three versions? I will just take it here from the last chorus, which is the loudest part of the track. Let's go.
Captivated, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah. I've lost my patience, wrapped his breath around my neck. No one else is worth the waiting, and I'm like, yeah. It's captivating, pressed his chest against my back, feeling dressed uncomplicated, and I'm like, yeah. No second guessing, wrapped his taste around my heart. Never loved nobody like this, and I'm like, Never cheat, only have for you. Didn't even have to give you clues. Honey's so good in this game of two. Oh wow, wow, what the hell? You just took me somewhere else. Works my body well.
Okay, I hope that you were able to listen to the difference between the three versions. I know that sometimes with YouTube compressions it's not always very easy when it's, but I think here it's pretty clear. I don't know what you thought about GC, but for me here at least it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty clear as well for me. I mean, I'm with you on another platform, and so I'm not listening via YouTube, and I'm aware people via YouTube it's going to be really much more difficult, obviously, to appreciate. But I think because they're quite distinctly different, I think people should still be able to get an idea of how it affects, how loudness affects, particularly the transient. And I know that's something you're going to discuss. I think we're already seeing some answers. Some people prefer the green, the second. Some people prefer the blue. Mm-hmm. Some people prefer the orange. So, it's quite split at the moment.
Orange is the unmastered.
It's the unmastered version. Or maybe they meant
the yellow.
Probably the yellow, yeah.
Yeah, so of course, it's again, I would say, a matter of taste. And why I'm explaining that is because the mastering and especially since the introduction of the loudness normalization on streaming services, I'm talking about YouTube, Spotify, Tidal, iTunes, Amazon, Pandora, that you see here in this little upright box window. So basically they added a threshold, if you like. I will try to explain that in a very basic way, but literally it's a threshold, and of course everyone didn't put the threshold at the same level, but let's say compare it to a kind of average level, minus 14 LUFS. Probably that lots of you already read about this numbers or settings. So we are talking about minus 14 LUFS. And everything above will be turned down, and everything below, it's not quite accurate anymore, but it was a time like Spotify before. They now changed it, but everything below was pushed up. But I think now it's kind of more the same level for everyone. But most of the time, we can say that everything is above minus 14 LUFS, so everything is played at the same level. And they did that, I think, because me included, I'm listening over, or consume music over, of course, still vinyl, but most of the time is, I would say, one of them, these platforms. And I'm using playlists, and sometimes I'm putting tracks from the 80s, 90s, 2000, and actual music. And of course, it's nice to have them all at the same level, otherwise you need to turn up or down the volume if you are listening to a very dynamic track from the 80s and then something very loud after, and wow, you it's kind of in your face effect. It's for that reason. And the other reason is that actually people who are listening to streaming services, music over streaming services, they are listening to a lossy version of your music. So they are not listening to, on WAV or IFF versions, but they are listening to MP3 or the equivalent for streaming services. Just for the record, if you're not aware about that if you, for instance, master, or you set your mastering limiter at 0 dBFS for the output for the rendering, for a waveform, that's okay. But if you convert this waveform into an MP3 or a lossy version, then you will have the encoding will add some extra peaks, which means that clipping is occurring at that time. So that's why they are requiring actually to send a track that is mastered at -1 dBFS, sometimes even -2 dBFS, depend. So that's mostly one kind of problem compared to DJs who are used to receive the wave or the IFF version, or even the MP3 quite loud or quite near to 0 dBFS. There is a kind of difference between two versions, and that's another reason I will talk about a mastering kind of hybrid between an optimized master for streaming services and a very loud one. This is kind of most of the time I would say the green one. My approach for music that is supposed to be and sounding great on streaming services and sounding great on clubs would be more the green one. Though I personally will prefer the blue one. And at the end I will also show you the difference, not only how it looks, but also how it sounds. When we send, let's say we send the 3 versions on Spotify, how it will look, how it will sound. So that I will show you at the end. But first, I will show you my process, how I achieved this kind of mastering. So the first one is one Ozone instance with all these modules. So let's just show you my studio. This is my studio, my mastering studio. So I'm using analog board and I'm using digital plugins as well. So I'm more in a hybrid configuration. So I have plugins before my analog loop and after my analog loop. And what I show you here, it's kind of a replication of this analog boards with EQ, compressor, and what you see here, except the tape, which actually I will show you why I'm also more using tape kind of things. Okay, so my 2 favorite plugins that I always use in my analog setup, even it's the master rebalance, because it allows me here. You have 3 parameters: the vocals, the bass, and the drums, and 1 sliders, which means that you can decide. Of course, it's all the vocals, all the bass, all the drums, but you can actually access to the. Mainly, I'm using it for vocals, but it allows me to push or turn down the volume of the vocals on an already mixed track, which is very handy when the vocals sometimes is a little bit mixed too low, I would say, and needs to be a little bit more in your face kind of effects. Then I like to push the vocal, and I did it here. You see, it's plus 1.3 dB. Then the second module is the low end focus, and this is also very important in my mastering process, because it's a module that allows you to add contrast in the low end. So you say here from 36 to 252 hertz, you can add contrast. You see I pushed a little bit here the contrast and a little bit of the gain, and it allows you to give you more contrast between the bass and the kick, and it adds a little bit more groove, I would say. You can of course make it in mid and side or just in stereo, but I like to separate. Depends, of course, if the bass has a wide effect, then of course you will go more for the stereo. But most of the time, if the bass and the kick are really mono focused, then of course it's always good to separate the mid and the side. After it, one of the very important module is this exciter. I'm using it in a parallel mode. You can see here. I've separated in 3. Sometimes I'm using only 2 bands, but I have here a bunch of modules that I can use. Actually, it's more saturation modules. You can use analog, retro, tape. This is why I told you that most of the time I can also use the tape effect as an effect and not as a final medium or format. But let's say here I use the triode saturation, and I blend actually in parallel the saturated signal to the clean signal. And what it does, it's kind of a, if you think, you can see it as parallel compression actually, but I'm using more and more parallel saturation to push actually the density of the track, and it allows you to increase the density, what happened inside the waveform, but still keep this dynamic. And this is why for me it's very important when you approach the mastering, especially for streaming services. Because if you take just the track and you push everything up, then you will have kind of the result that we have here on the yellow waveform, which is kind of very loud, but still this one is kind of very loud, but still has dynamic. But sometimes you have this kind of big sausage looking waveform, because it's kind of everything is pushed up. If you use this technique to just add this parallel saturation to the clean signal, then it will push up, but still it will sound actually louder without be louder. It's kind of bizarre, but it is. Then I have this. Then I have this imager where I can split actually into the signals, the frequency, and like you can see, I'm until 160. It doesn't matter. It's plus minus 170. And below, I just reduce a little bit the stereo image to have this part here more in mono. And the second one here, I increase a little bit the stereo image to widening a little bit more. And this add a little bit this 3D effect. And then we have, this is what I'm using in hardware as well. From here, the stereo image, and then this kind of sequence. I have an equalizer, a compressor, another equalizer, and another compressor. Or I can, of course, as well in my analog loop, decide the sequence. But most of the time, I would say this is my startup. I have some flickering. I don't know if you have flickering as well in my screen, but I don't know what. Probably it's a kind of heavy signal right now. But yeah, so equalizer, again, mid and side. I can decide how much I like to tweak the signal between the mono and the stereo side. That's a little bit to check, but I like to start with this. And then this is to shape my signal to feed my first compressor. And I will show you, I will mute the sound so you will not hear it. But just to show you that I actually don't compress anymore. It's really to catch the last peaks, I would say, to just, reduce it a little bit here and there, but not to compress, because the music is already, when it's properly mixed and produced, it's already nicely compressed, so I don't compress anymore in mastering stage. But though I prefer then to parallel saturate as kind of compressor style of effect. And then I have another EQ here, which is more a Pultec style of EQ, which is more broad, fine-tuned EQ-ish style. And then another compressor in case there is no still more extra peaks. And that's it actually. I have here a maximizer, but it doesn't do anything. It's just set to maybe push the level. I used it to create a very loud one, but most of the time it's disabled. So actually you can use this setup here to master your own track.
Cool. So that Dan, so what you were saying, it's pretty much what you've done in Ozone here is you've replicated your kind of workflow with your hardware, haven't you? Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and normally what you would do is maybe like you were saying, an hybrid of have a little bit of that set up digitally, and I assume a lot of maybe compression, and for EQ you may want to go more. And obviously, I noticed you had a lovely Studer tape machine, so I suppose that you're going to do that for the tape sound, for the tape saturation, and getting that glue together. And also for the EQ, I imagine you would take advantage of the lovely hardware EQ that you have to get that character.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more like you just said, a more character approach, because like I said in the beginning, I see it more as a creative step. So it's my way to express myself through the mastering to achieve this touch. I would say I have kind of a touch. I think so, but you can achieve this same results with plugins. There is no problem. I'm coming from the analog world, so I like to touch knobs, but I'm faster actually with the analog compared to fully in digital. But I'm pretty sure that nowadays people who are using plugins only, they are probably way faster than me in analog. So it's just a matter of taste as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I've picked up on something you've said, which I think is really interesting. People, often when they think mastering, they often think about a technical approach. How do you EQ? How do you compress? And they don't really maybe consider always the kind of creative aspect. And I've noticed, you were talking about when you were refocusing the bass, you mentioned the word groove, for example. And I think that that's very true, that in mastering, as much as in mixing, you can affect the groove, or things groove in a track around compression and EQ. And it's really, I think it's quite fascinating to approach it that way. And it's a little bit more interesting than just purely on the technical and frequency theory, if you like.
Yeah, totally. And one other aspect, because here we are talking about a stereo mastering, I also like to have, if the budget is there, but because it takes a little bit more time, of course, it's stems mastering. And stems mastering is kind of remixing, but of course not completely rebalance everything, because otherwise it's a mixing, but it's more having access to the same approach as a stereo mastering, but more on the subgroups. Let's say kick alone, and then the drums without the kick, or the basses, or the synths, or vocals, instruments when it's not the synthesizers, or like, I don't know, cello, strings, piano, whatever. And then the effects. When you separate that in, let's say, 8 stems, then you can apply this same technique, but then you have a more accurate result in the end, because you can really fine-tune every separate elements, and you end up with something. And especially with the stereo, the parallel saturation, then you can achieve something very big actually, but still very dynamic. This is my favorite approach to master nowadays.
Okay. But yeah, that's interesting. Because I suppose, I mean, if like you've said, when a track is really well mixed and well produced, you probably have a little bit less to do at the mastering, isn't it, ultimately? But when sometimes you've got really something majorly wrong in the track, then obviously that's when you've got to start digging into it. And there are limitations to what you can do to a stereo mix, obviously.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for me, I always say that many years now, that the best mastering is when you don't need a mastering. So it's rarely happened to me on almost 20 years now. But yeah, I would say that's probably the perfect mastering. It's when you don't need it. Okay, let's change again here. Then I have 2 maximizer in the row here. I'm using all the time 2 limiters. I prefer that. I always found that 2 limiters working less has a better result compared to just one who is working more, and you don't feel this pumping effect pretty much. So that's why. And you see that I have here one setting more on the crisp with kind of transcendent phases, and transcendent phases it's working on the transients, of course, and it adds a little bit more on this crispy effect. And the second one is very transparent. It's just here to on you see balanced settings, nothing special. It's just a matter of again, like using the compressor as well to catch the last peaks and to push here and there a little bit more. So, and then I can achieve this kind of results here. When you see the blue one, this is more for the streaming services. And how I achieve that, it's to play with all parameters. Of course, once I've chosen and decided how much parallel exciting or parallel compression or whatever here you use to shape the sound, and this EQ and compression as well, so all the settings here, then you can play with here the final output, and then to play with these two maximizers, and then you can really shape the loudness to achieve a certain type of mastering. Most of the time when I'm playing, let's play this streaming one, I will just mute this guy so I can just more focus. Most of the time I don't like to see to say a look at the screen, because when you are here in my room, most of the time I'm even mastering with closed eyes, because I really need to feel the results. I don't look at the screen. But in this particular case, just have a look here on the short-term value. So we are talking that the loudest part of the track here at the end is hitting -9 LUFS on a short term. So this is a way to measure the loudness really on the very short instant values. And if you try to stay around -9 LUFS on the short term, then you end up with the result here. You can see it above, around maximum, I would say -2 to -3 gain reduction. When you think that there is already 1 dB less, because my output is set to -0.7. Normally it should be -1, but I try to be in between, otherwise it's not loud enough for DJs. So you can end up with around -3 dB on gain reduction on streaming services. Then you still use actually the most of the dynamic range, and so that's my way to. Otherwise, then of course you have this green one, and this is a little bit louder. You can see that I'm hitting 1 dB more, even 1.5 dB more. And RMS is pretty loud, actually. It's -4 or 5, so it's pretty okay.
So it's already pretty okay, isn't it? It's pretty loud already, but
it's pretty loud, but it's still okay-ish. And then you have this one, and that's -3 RMS. That's properly loud, I would say.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have questions in the chat meanwhile. Otherwise, I can also show a little bit how it sounds. The separate, all the
There's a couple of questions, I suppose. I mean, there's somebody who was asking actually, can we hear the different versions loudness match? And I think that's the plan, that's the idea. I think we're gonna, you're planning to play all the 3 versions together at the same level to really understand what is happening when you push something really, really hard. One of the questions was, do you use the same plugins on every, or the same plugins when you approach every track, or do you approach every track unique, or do you have, like you were saying, a starting template? And you may not apply everything the same way, but you have kind of a, I suppose, like a signal chain template.
Like I showed here. Here we go. This is actually my startup way to approach my master. I always have this master rebalance and this low end focus, even in my hybrid setup. They are really here to shape. Sometimes I'm switching between these two, so I'm adding more contrast before I'm working on the vocals. But I would say 95% of the time, this is how I approach. First, master rebalance, I push the vocal a little bit more, and then I'm playing with the low end focus. And then, of course, and I have these settings here, and again, it really depends. Sometimes I even use one equalizer and that's it. Sometimes I'm using just one compressor. I don't necessarily need to have one compressor, one EQ, or one EQ, one compressor, one EQ, one compressor. I also like to take it like the two maximizers in a row that, they are just working here a little bit and here and a little bit there. And that's it, just to add. Sometimes when you see this equalizer, it's more surgical one, who is really more to okay, I'm shaping the sound, compared to this EQ. You see there barely nothing happened, but if I can play it, maybe you will hear the difference. I hope so. It can be subtle, of course. So let's try if you hear it. Of course, unmute.
Captivated, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah. I've lost my patience, wrapped his breath around my neck. No one else is worth the waiting, and I'm like.
No, it's very subtle even for me, so you're probably not hearing it. But just to really show you that actually it's there. But most of the time, if let's even bypass. You see, I have the gain match. Gain match allows you to, when you bypass the process and not to be at the same level with and without the process. So that's without, so clean.
Captivated, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah. I've lost my patience, wrapped his breath around my neck. No one else is worth the waiting, and I'm like, yeah. It's captivating, pressed his chest against my back, feeling dressed uncomplicated, and I'm like, yeah. No second.
And you can pretty hear that the vocals actually is more pushed up front. It happens for two reasons. It's the master rebalance, because I push the vocals one third more up front, and then here I have the equalizers here and there. You see that I pushed a little bit here and there. So I did that, but I have of course a pretty accurate room and pretty accurate loudspeakers, and I know exactly when the vocals is sounding great here, then it sounds great everywhere. And most of the time, vocals, I like to push them a little bit more up front, because this is, of course, it depends of the genre of the music genres, but in that case, I think that it's a major element to sound great on radio and everywhere. So this is why I push the vocals a little bit more. But otherwise, I haven't done that much. It's kind of rebalancing, if you want, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. I could hear as well that the bass was more focused, and I think the top end was also a bit more focused in terms of separation between the vocal and what was happening up there. So it sounds great. Maybe we can take a couple of more questions that are relevant to what we were talking, and then maybe we can have a listen, and we'll take the final question. How does it sound for you, Dan?
Of course.
So one of the questions from Manny, do you automate when you master? And if you do, what do you automate?
Great question. Actually, it's not that often. It can happen when it's more mastering for albums or more a bigger EP. Then sometimes I can automate this master rebalance. This can happen because sometimes in track 2, for instance, for an album of 11 or 12 tracks, let's say, the vocals. Preferably, I would prefer to tell the producer or the mixer, okay, can you render me a new mix? But if the time is very short and you need to take the decisions very quickly, then it can happen, for instance, that I can automate this master rebalance vocals just for, let's say, the chorus or at a certain time of a certain place of the track. So that can happen, of course, but most of the time it's very, very rare. EQ sometimes can happen as well. Compressor never. I never automated compressor. But yeah, very good question.
Cool.
Level, yeah, I would say more the level can also happen. Just the level of the track.
Great. Another question, I think that you've started to touch on it, so it's probably a good time to address it. Why do you use 2 EQs in the same mastering chain? Thanks for your question, Anta.
Thanks for your question. Absolutely. I like you can see here my first EQ. It's really more to shape. I have it on the mid and side, which means that on this particular case, I increased a tiny bit more the body of the kick around 57 hertz, and then I had a little bit more, a little bump here in the 250 hertz. So that's almost on the mid side, so on the mono signal. And on the stereo side, you see that I reduce a little bit the low end, and then I increase kind of at the same level here the bass area, and a little bit more here to compensate with the mid side. You see, but that's more, I would say, more. Experience approach. Yeah, this is how I approach the mastering most of the time. I liked, but of course, like I said in the beginning, there are no rules necessarily. It is my guideline to use an EQ. It's you need to a little bit of practice, of course, because otherwise you can also screw a little bit the mix down if you go too wild with the side. So maybe it's wise to start with the stereo signal, and then if you feel comfortable, you can switch to the mid side and then start to reshape both sides. And then the other EQ, it's really more to you barely can see. Actually, if you see, I'm almost 6 dB here in boost, and you see that the curve is also almost not moving. So this EQ, I have the same as on hardware. It's really very broad, so the Q is very flat, so you can really boost a lot, but nothing moves that much at the end. So it's really more fine-tuning kind of EQ, but it's not absolutely necessary.
Sounds great. So I think there are a couple of more questions, but they're more about, I think, loudness and etc. So maybe it's a good time to play the 3 versions now, but at a match level. How do you think?
Totally. To do that, we can actually when I printed here the 3 versions, I imported them in RX8. You can see here we have the streaming version. Normally, of course, when you open RX, you end up with the waveform and the spectrum analyzer. You can use the slider here to switch from one to another, or just leave it in the middle. But in that case, let's just focus on the waveform. So you have the streaming versions, the download, and the very loud one. You see the difference between these 3. Let's say really the opposite. It's pretty much straightforward to see. Okay, so what I'm using, it's this loudness control, and it will analyze, you see, measurement, the output of my maximizer. I set up to -7, but you see that there is still extra peaks coming up, but yeah, I think it is still okay. and integrated almost -11. So for me, it's a pretty nice mastering for streaming services. But let's say, okay, let's target it to -1, which is the recommendation for streaming services, and then -14 LUFS. LKFS, it's the same, and LUF LKFS is the measurement in the US, but it's the same. So let's render it. Here we go. That's how it will look and sound on Spotify. Let's do the same now for. I'm sorry if my screen is flickering, but I think that's everything.
I think it's okay. I think we're
okay. And then that's the download version, so you can already have a look what's the difference between the streaming and the download. You see that there is this extra peaks. And then now let's take the last version, which is the very loud one. And you see that it will be reduced pretty much, actually. So that's the streaming version. And that's the very loud one and everything in between. Voilà. Just to, of course, it's not really 100% looking that way or happening that way. There are some other extra processing that, but I think you have the idea what it will be happening on streaming services. So what I did now, I actually exported the 3 versions here, and you can actually listen again. I will just play them from the most loudest part, and you will hear that they are actually at the same level, but listen carefully, probably better on headphones and such, to listen what's happening actually between the 3 versions. Here we go.
It's captivating, pressed his hands around my waist, feeling drunk, intoxicated, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've lost my patience, wrapped his breath around my neck. No one else is worth the waiting, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's captivating, pressed his chest against my back, feeling dressed uncomplicated, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No second guessing, wrapped his taste around my heart. Never loved nobody like this, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. How am I ever gonna lie to you?
I don't know if you heard it, but yeah, actually, I would like to know which one was the loudest one now, after
yeah,
the
absolutely.
process.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the yellow version, the very loud one, is suddenly losing all the punch, basically, because you're losing all those transients, and you really hear it on the snare, on the kick, on everything that is supposed to punch, you know. And I think that's really interesting when people don't realize that this is what's happening. The louder you make it, is you're losing actually all the punch and the power, and you sacrifice all this power just for the sake of loudness, which doesn't make any sense anymore, because the streaming platform have a system which I think it's something that a lot of mastering engineers were waiting for that to happen, because I'm sure as a mastering engineer, you've been there so many times, and I've seen it with, I've more specialized in mixing, but the number of times where I've never mixed super, super loud for the sake of it. I love dynamic, I love punch and transient, and you go to the mastering and the artist is like, yeah, but I'm not as loud as that record. Can you push it up? And you're like, we're gonna lose a lot out of that. So I'm sure for you, this new system of leveling on the streaming platform, it's something that a lot of mastering engineers have welcomed, I think.
Yeah, of course, it helped to for the communication at the end, because like you said, it's a lot to convince, and more in electronic music or club music, I would say. And I always had this, not always, but sometimes, because people know that I'm not a fan of mastering very loud. This is my way to master. I like to I think that masters should serve the music and not make it sound worse actually. So otherwise, I don't see the purpose of mastering. But still, sometimes clients tell me, I have a kind of returns that DJs need to push the gain up of the mixers 1 or 2 dB more. I can understand when you are not used. I'm coming from the vinyl era when I was DJing back in the 90s, and before I beat match, I needed to level match the vinyl because there were so many vinyls who are just different on the level side. So you needed actually to tweak all the time with the gain up. And of course, in a digital world, everything is already mastered at the 0 dBFS, so they are kind of not used to use this gain up. But actually, this demonstration shows you that at the same level, a dynamic version sounds better and louder actually compared to auto compressed. So this is why my approach it's more on the green one. Which is kind of in between solution. So I know that I make everyone happy with this version. I would say even the download version, I will not go that far. Here it's more to have a better demonstration. But I would say I would go in between of the green and the blue. Okay. That's my way. Yeah, of course. I totally understand. Now I'm talking more for dance music. When I'm mastering indie rock bands, or when it's not supposed to be played on clubs, then I tend to go for the blue one for sure, because I like to say to my clients that you have all the dynamic range used on the streaming services, and your track will actually sound louder compared to the other one. Even if it's turned down to, let's say, negative 3 dB, because you have punch, you have clarity, and all the details, it will actually have a better impact on the quality. So why not using it actually? So I think that if the music needs to be released, it will be released anyway. So why not to grab this kind of extra quality to people who understand it? Because it's always when I prefer to have people who say, "Oh wow, this is sounding great," for connoisseur, I would say, or compared to have a negative comment on, "Oh, why it's really
why is it so loud?
Loud or whatever." So, I mean, if it will be released, then it will be released anyway. So that's my approach.
Yeah. So we've got 3 questions that I think are relevant to the discussions we're having now. So,
sure.
Which one out of those 3 masters you would use for mastering to vinyl?
Definitely the blue one.
Definitely. I mean, mastering for vinyl is quite a different science as well, isn't it?
But I know that when I'm sending a master, that it's kind of, I would say, optimized. I don't know, because it's not really optimized, but more dynamic version. Then the cutting engineer is very happy because he has almost nothing to do probably. But it's more easier for them to cut the masterpiece. When we still have the dynamics and everything controlled compared to something very loud. Now I'm not cutting engineer, so I know that the return that I have, they are pretty happy. So
Definitely, I've got a friend who specializes in vinyl cutting, and he always says to me that he actually a vinyl breathes more when it jumps. You know, if the sounds are jumping and bouncing, you need that bounce for the vinyl to sound great, which goes along, what we're discussing here. A question, how do you get the yellow one so loud?
3 points, actually. And I will take the opportunity to talk about sometimes I can understand why certain type of music kind of needs to be loud to have this. It's part of the sound, I would say, or it's part of the music genre. I am talking about dubstep, or maybe other genres who needs to, it's really loud, or EDM actually as well. Though we are going more in another direction, but for that particular case, and feel free to talk in chat. Maybe it would be interesting to sometimes in few times make another session if you like about stems mastering, because on the stems mastering side, I'm using a lot of this parallel, not compression but saturation, to push up the volume but still be dynamic. And if you do it, like I explained a few minutes ago, if you do it on separate groups, then you can really rebalance everything in a nice way, and to push the volume up without sacrificing the dynamic, the extra microdynamic, what it's very, very important for streaming services. So to achieve this yellow, I pushed a little bit more the parallel saturation here. I used an extra limiter here, so I probably reduced a little bit here the dynamic as well, and then I'm definitely pushing here this 2 limiter in a row, I would say.
Yeah. And obviously those 2 limiters, by doing that, this is where the kind of damage to the punch is happening, isn't it? That's where the transient gets inevitably. That's the nature of a limiter, isn't it?
That's the nature of digital, I would say, because 0 dB is the max, so you can push it as far as you want. At a certain time, you cannot go further. So of course, then you pack everything down. So that's inevitable.
Yeah. And we've got the last questions, which I think I'm sure you must have been asked pretty much on every single project when it's a new mix engineer you're working with. What levels should a mix be sent to be mastered?
That's a good question. It's very difficult to answer, because again, it depends on the music genre and how it was produced and mixed, or both of them, because nowadays producing and mixing is very difficult to separate. Most of the time it's both together, or the mixing engineer takes creative decision, kind of a producer had, to achieve his mixing approach. So level-wise, I would say not clipping. Most of the time I'm asking -3 dB peaks. That's my go-to, but even if I'm not a fan, and I'm still mixing as well. So when I'm mixing, I never use any process on the master until the end, and sometimes I can add a maximizer on the master to just a little bit here and there to tighten it, the dynamic, if it's necessary. But most of the time I mix without anything on a master. That's my way, but I know that mixing engineer also like to use by scratch from the beginning something on the master, because it's their type of sound, of course. So it doesn't matter. For me, if the very most important part is to have the knowledge to control the dynamic. That's probably my most important part in the mix. If I feel that it's controlled, then it doesn't matter how loud it is.
Yeah. That's great, Dan. I think we've got no more question now, and I think it's been a great session. I think I believe we're getting some really great feedback in the chat, and I think a lot of people have. It's kind of been an eye opener about the relationship between loudness, dynamic, and what it does to the music and the groove of it. So that's been really great. And like you said, I thought let's do another session on stem mastering. That sounds great.
Would be lovely.
I think it would be lovely. It would really be lovely. And I believe you've agreed to share your template, your preset kind of starting template. So we'll be sharing that with people who will be able to download. So thanks very much. That's very kind of you. So I think we can end that session for today. If it's all good with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think we covered. Of course, we can talk about these topics for ages. I would say in the last word that no matter the decision you take, if you want to really go loud, it's okay as well. It's not mandatory to be dynamic. I would say that the final decision is on your end. And but just be aware what happens, and that's what's actually my purpose of course showing how I approach the mastering with Ozone and iZotope products. It was the key, and on a side note as well, to just be aware that what you take as a creative decision, what impact it will have. So both of them sounding great. I think even I'm not super fan of the yellow one because it's probably too loud, but compared to the blue and the green one, again here as a final note, they are both sounding great. So no matter the decision you take, if you want to please the DJs and everyone, or just the DJs, then you go for the yellow. If you want to please everyone, I will go for the green. And if you say, okay, no, it will not be played on club music, but I really want to focus on streaming services and sounds great everywhere, more on a wider range of audience, then I would go for the blue one. But again, there is no rules there. So that's my final word.
Thank you very much for your time, Dan. And it sounded great. It really sounded great. So thank you for the work on this and just the great tips and showing your techniques, which I'm sure a lot of people hopefully will be able to try and play with over the weekends.
Yeah, feel free to write in the chat. I will check it out. If you have some more questions, feel free. And I would love to answer if there are more questions afterwards. So feel free. I'm looking forward.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for watching. It's been, hope you've enjoyed the session as much as we have, both Dan and I. Remember, if you want to find out more information about our courses, you can head over to pointblankmusicschool.com. We're wishing you all a great weekend. Stay safe, take care, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.